Welcome to the audiobook of The Great Housing Hijack. This section's called Housing Hijackers, Chapter 9, Academics and Policy Wonks. I'll start with a quote. Thousands of work hours and millions of dollars worth of salaries and consultants' fees have been spent on these reports, and absolutely nothing has come from them. That's Leith Van Onselen, chief economist at Macro Business, making the point that more reports and research doesn't make housing cheaper. It is not hard to understand why politicians prefer not to crush the value of their property investments and the value of homes in their electorates. But we are all grown-ups, and we understand political trade-offs. But surely the researchers, the frank and fearless public servants, and the various not-for-profit housing agencies and homelessness organisations have been pushing back against these politics, facing up to the symmetry of property markets and putting forward real solutions, not fake ones, so that all Australians can be housed cheaply and comfortably. We can only hope. Policy wonks of all stripes succumb to the incentive to ticket clip. It is no surprise that property owners tell stories, even lies, to ensure that policy change works in their favour, but the transformation of these stories into acceptable political discourse is a process that needs to be investigated. The hijacking of housing research comes from two incentives. First is the direct influence of property owners, their own researchers and funding of research organisations. Second, it has become the business of these groups, academics, housing and homelessness organisations, think tanks and public servants, to sell housing problems and their analyses of it, not solutions. It was funny and obvious when a Goldman Sachs analyst in 2018 asked a fundamental question about the future of the biotech sector. They said, "Is curing patients a sustainable business model?" This problem plagues the health and medical sectors of the economy because cheap and effective cures are less profitable than slow, ineffective and expensive treatments. It's all about creating demand for your product, not destroying demand. So it is with housing. The business opportunities it creates are the consultancies, the board positions at not-for-profits, the academic jobs with the status that comes from travelling the world to talk about your unique insight into why the housing market has some new and previously unforeseen problem. Solving housing puts you out of a job. The worst part of it all is that when real effective change is proposed, those who are meant to be the adults in the room often end up pushing back hardest. It is just like when the pharmaceutical company pushes hard against a new competitor with a cheap and more effective treatment that will destroy the incumbent's business. But it is far less obvious to outsiders. In 2017, I co-wrote a book about grey corruption and political favouritism in Australia called Rigged: How Networks of Powerful Mates Rip Off Everyday Australians. About 6 months after it was published, I received a phone call that went something like this. "Hi, is this Cameron Murray?" "Yes, it is." "You don't know me. My name is Kate." And it wasn't really Kate, that's just the name I'm using for this book. "Hi Kate, what can I do for you?" "I've read your book and I think I have another interesting case study for you. I've been working at a homeless charity for the past year. When I first started, it really seemed like everyone was working hard to make a difference. The CEO does the annual sleep out to raise awareness of the homelessness crisis. We give people food and wash their clothes. But what I've noticed is that when real solutions are proposed, with real money attached, the leaders of the organisation start finding holes in these programs and eventually do not support them. It's like they don't want to solve homelessness because it will mean the organisation might no longer be needed and they will lose their high-status job. This realisation has shaken me. After reading your book, I figured you would be someone who would understand what I'm saying. It is so disheartening to realise that the whole organisation is mostly about appearing to care rather than achieving results for homeless people. I didn't really know how to respond. I did my best. The conversation shook me. Here we were, facing the blunt reality that the product of the homelessness industry is the research activity, the conferences, the glossy strategy documents, and the job status that comes along with it. the product is not solving homelessness, because without it, the industry would cease to exist. This section's called Property Owners and Their Research Funding. Academia should be insulated to some degree from these incentives, but it's not. Consider the case of the Ralph and Goldie Lewis Center for Regional Policy Studies at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA. It produces reams of research about what policies might improve housing market outcomes, influencing Australian researchers and others around the world. The research produced by this group has always puzzled me. While digging into its research in more depth, I discovered that it was funded by a major property developer. It all fell into place. This group is an example of powerful economic interests covertly influencing academic and policy debate. The Lewis Group of companies founded the centre in 1989. In 2019, the Lewis Centre launched its Randall Lewis Housing Initiative, named after Randall Lewis, the Senior Executive Vice President for Marketing for the Lewis Group of companies, one of the biggest housing developers in the United States. The Lewis Group reports having a land bank of more than 50,000 detached homes and 16,500 apartments, meaning that, on property it already owns, the group could build 66,500 new dwellings anytime it wants. The Lewis Group's land bank is more extensive than the holdings of most of Australia's large publicly listed property developers like Lendlease, Stockland, Mirvac and Peet. In a 2014 article, Randall Lewis explained how his company takes the financially sensible approach for them of land banking and adjusting rates of new housing development to meet the absorption rate equilibrium. Out of the group's 16,500 feasible new apartments, it plans to only build 500 per year over the next decade, which is just 3% per year. There is no way that a property owner with a balance sheet in the billions has a financial interest in policies that bring down the value of property assets, or that increase property-related taxes, or that force him or her to develop faster than the absorption rate equilibrium. The Lewis Group is also a landlord with 11,000 units, so it won't support policies that reduce rents to benefit tenants. Like property lobbyists in Australia, research from UCLA's Lewis Centre is focused on deregulating town planning, what I call the supply myth, and discuss in Chapter 18. Having a research group housed at a university gives credibility to the Lewis Group's research. Coincidentally, its research is always beneficial for its property owner funders. This section's called Soft Political Influence. I'm not claiming that all academic research is manipulated by property industry funding and donations. Influence can be softer, and political incentives can seep into the wonk realm in other ways. For example, the Australian Housing and Urban Research Institute, AHURI, is a federally funded agency that each year provides millions in grant money to academics. This was a free sample of the audiobook of The Great Housing Hijack. To get full access, sign up as a paid subscriber at fresheconomicthinking.com.